Welcome to Shelf Life. This week I'm speaking with Helen Billy Elm Williams about her children's book Lost in the Cockpit Country. Hi, Helen. So good to have you with me. You know, this has been long overdue, you must admit. Long overdue for us to have a chat. And I can't wait to talk about the actual book. But before we talk about the actual book, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, how I came to Jamaica, that perhaps the interesting thing is that I came to Jamaica on a banana boat.
Really?
25 teachers on the banana boat coming to take up posts in Jamaica.
An actual banana boat?
An actual banana boat. Of course, there weren't any bananas in it going up in that direction. It had cars and other things, but it was going to pick up bananas to carry back to England.
Oh.
So,
where in England are you from, originally?
I was born in Hereford. I lived on the west coast of Scotland for a couple of years, and then I was in High Wycombe, which is a dormitory town for London, really.
Okay, so you actually came to Jamaica to take up a position as a teacher?
Right, yes.
In what area?
Biology. Biology is my...
And you taught where?
I taught at Russell's.
Oh.
That was at that time, the rural schools were not so popular for Jamaican teachers, so they were mainly staffed by expatriates.
That's interesting, because I grew up in Mandeville in the 60s. Now I'm dating myself, I know, but I grew up in Mandeville in the 60s, and we had a lot of expatriate teachers, and I never gave it a second thought as to why. But now that you're saying that, it makes sense. The rural schools were not as attractive for the Jamaican teachers, so the expatriates came to the rural areas. That makes a lot of sense. So biology, how did you end up in writing?
Oh, well, when I got married in 1974, and then when I had my children, my two daughters, their schooling wasn't that I wasn't satisfied with the schooling, so I started my own school. It was really like homeschooling my daughters and having other children along. And I was wanting the children to read, and I couldn't get any books. I mean, Sangsters in Montego Bay had, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Enid Blyton books. I said, well, there aren't any books now. Here in my presumptuous self, I think everybody says this, they're going to write a book. And the amount of people I meet who say, I'm writing a book. But, so that was kind of the spark. But then after that, we moved to Montego Bay, and I was teaching at Montego Bay Community College.
Okay.
So that was very much full time, but I was working on a book on and off, and I was saying, well, let me see what happens. So after I retired, then I did a course in children's writing.
Okay.
And I started, and my main aim was to write adventure books, particularly for boys, because boys aren't so keen on reading. I hope that I've written something that they'll find interesting and want to read.
And it's a good target too, because boys aren't targeted a lot with books because they're perceived as not wanting to read.
What I really wanted to do was write for emergent readers, older emergent readers, because all the books for emergent readers are like little stories about teddy bears and that kind of thing, which older emergent readers don't want to read. Mm-hmm. So, but there's no market for that at all. So I wrote quite a few adventure stories for boys, and then there was a appeal put out for fantasy. I had, after the course that we did, I was with a critique group. Well, three of us, we're still meeting after these. It was 2004 I did that, and we're still meeting. And we submitted work to each other and critiqued each other's work. We're doing more of now, what we're doing more of now is a book club.
Okay.
my critique partner said, yes, you can write fantasy, have a go at it. So that is where I see you have a frog behind you.
I love my frog.
Yeah. So Delroy and the Marog Kingdom, Delroy and the Marogs were a type of, well, they didn't call themselves, they weren't frogs, they would have been turned into frogs and continued. So Delroy was turned into a frog. So this was a fantasy story. So the adventure stories got put one side. But I learned a great deal from writing Delroy and working with an editor. That was, and the other thing too that I found after I started writing, and they said, oh, you must be on Facebook and you must be on Twitter and so on. And there were other people saying, oh, no, you mustn't be on Facebook. All these terrible things are going to happen if you're on Facebook and so on. But what I found was that I made so many connections and I've made so many friends.
Yes.
Because of the writing, friends who are writers, people like Dan Brown.
And that's how we connected, or something to do with Independent Voices was the first time I think I connected with you. And through your writer's name, Billy Elm.
Yes.
Very interesting because, some of us have pseudonyms. My children's book that is to come out is being published in a pseudonym. But Billy Elm, explain that. Why Billy Elm?
Well, I was finding, how do you choose a pen name? And I found this suggestion that you have your pet's first name and the street where you lived. Our pet's name. My first pet was a cat called Billy. And the street I lived on had a name. And I don't know why you're laughing, because I won't tell you the rest of it that I found out afterwards.
Because it just sounds, it's I was expecting something really profound, I must tell you. I was anticipating some very profound thing about some writer that you knew, who you used to read, whose name was Billy, and that's funny. That's very funny how you choose a pen name. I like that.
Well, and I looked at, when I had chosen that, I went on internet to find out, if this was anybody's name, to find out how common it was, and it wasn't common at all. I mean, Helen Williams, if you go on, there are at least 2,000 of us.
My name, which last name is Falloon-Reid, is my previous name, but I kept it because my maiden name is common. My current married name is also very common. But if you go and you search for Falloon-Reid, chances are you're going to find me and the ex-husband, you're not going to find anybody else. So I kept it. So name is very important to a writer. And Billy Elm, for one, when you first see it, you're not sure if it's a man or a woman.
Right.
And it's kind of cool because for boys writing, especially adventure stories for boys, the boys kind of feel like there's a man writing in their own language.
Yes, right. So that's another of the reasons it's kind of deceptive, but the whole story, the whole story is a lie if you want to look at it like that.
But let's get back to you and your book. So we're talking about this really, really great book that just really had me enraptured, because it's all about being lost in the Cockpit Country. So, for a lot of us, we hear about the Cockpit Country. We have maybe driven through parts of it and not even realize. But this story actually takes place deep in the Cockpit Country. And I've been into some of the interior areas of the Cockpit Country. And I've been privileged to be going to some of those inner areas and see some of the caves and stuff like that back in the day, in a former lifetime. When you were writing this, how much research did you do in terms of you physically going to the Cockpit Country? Because your story is very vivid. Your descriptions are very vivid. I can see everything that your protagonist is seeing, everything the little boy is seeing, I can see. And so I really wondered when I was reading it, how much of it is from personal experience and how much of it is just from book research?
Well, I had one visit to the Cockpit Country before I was writing it. And then after I had written it and was making changes, I've had another visit to the Cockpit Country. And also been to the, like the edge of the Cockpit Country, Stewart Town.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would say I've had 3 or 4 visits to the Cockpit Country. And I also went to Accompong.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just to the town of Accompong.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go. I saw the kinder tree.
Ah, did you pour libation under the kinder tree? Did you walk with your white rum?
No, didn't do that.
Because we made sure we walked with our white rum, and we made sure to bless the spirits under the kinder tree with the spirits under the kinder tree. But yes, Accompong was quite an interesting trip. So you actually did do a lot of personal.
Yes. What? When we went to Accompong, we went to the community centre, mm-hmm. and they had a short video that they showed, mm-hmm. and to my great surprise, there was one of my neighbours on this video. So Mrs. Corley.
Okay.
And she had, well, long ago left Accompong because she had gone to England and done nursing, I think, and then she was in charge of the Blossom Gardens Children's Home
in Montego
Bay.
And
she lives just across the street from us. And her when I went to see her and got a wealth of information from her about the Maroons and about how life used to be and how it is now.
Okay, so a lot of really good research, because as I said, the details in the book, I gotta tell everybody that I've been to the Cockpit Country a couple of times. I've been fortunate enough, I used to work for the Jamaica Tourist Board, to be able to actually go deep into the Cockpit Country. And it's just such a marvelous place. And it's funny that when you speak to people who are not environmentalists or even just environmentally conscious, and you explain why you shouldn't be mining in the Cockpit Country and why you shouldn't be doing all these things in the Cockpit Country, they carry on like, well, so what? It's some snake that we don't have any use for, and a couple of mongoose. But the Cockpit Country is such a rich, such a diverse area. And in your book, you talk about one of the, and I'm not giving it away, but one of the characters in the book was actually stealing endemic species from the Cockpit Country and selling them. How much of an environmentalist are you? I mean, is this just part of the story, or is this something that you're passionate about?
Oh, yes, I'm very much an environmentalist. Yes. Well, as I say, I was a biology teacher for all those years.
True.
But I mean, one of the main reasons why we shouldn't damage the Cockpit Country is because of water supply. Mm-hmm. It's just everybody's need, and just a practical thing, nothing to do with saving endangered species or anything like that. If people feel that those don't matter, but they certainly must be concerned about their own water supply.
Yeah, which is where a lot of our water supply comes from, that whole area. And I loved when you described how he went up on the hill and was able to look across at the hills and the valleys. If you've ever flown across the island from Montego Bay to Kingston, in particular, if you're flying from like Cayman into Kingston, you fly directly over that. And it is the most beautiful sight from the air to see that, to be able to see that. So your characters, how did you develop your characters in this book? Because you've got these three brothers who have gone on this overnight camping trip, school trip, into the Cockpit Country. Tell me about how you came up with these three young men. Were they mirrors of somebody you know?
Oh, well, I would say from students, I've met so many. I've been, with different students. So there was no particular role model for them.
Okay.
And the two primary characters, Kimar and O'Shane. In fact, when I first started writing them, that wasn't their names. Their names were changed afterwards. So,
Yeah.
but they were, and this is where I just was imagining really the farming family.
Right.
And in fact, another book that I'd written, which I have not had published, I was told about this event from a teacher who lived up in that area and did potato farming, about how the potato crop was stolen, like the day before that they were going to go out the next day and reap the potatoes, and when they got up in the morning, they'd all gone. And that was an actual thing that happened. So that was what I based that story on.
The whole stealing of the goats.
The goats, that came afterwards. I had to find a reason why he would have been there.
Okay.
So that, some of these things become necessary after, they're not the initial thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And your character who actually, I don't want to give away the story, because I think the story is something that children should read. And I would encourage everybody in the diaspora, especially, yes, in Jamaica as well, but people in the diaspora who, if you want your grandchildren or your children to really get a feel for Jamaica, not just the tourist side, not just the beaches and, all of that, but to really feel our country, really feel our island, then this is one of the books that they should read, because it takes them into the interior, the areas that very few people really ever write about, or very few people ever talk about. We have a lot of books about the struggle. We have a lot of books about, the North Coast, but not much about this kind of interior living. And so the father of the boys was an interesting character, and who he turned out to be, very protective. And it was lovely to see a story in which the father played a more dominant role. A lot of times it's a mother who is playing the dominant role.
So many children's stories about orphans. If you look into it, you'll find that they're orphans. And you really, as a writer, you put your children into the most terrible situation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them start off as being orphans, and a lot of them start off being one. So I said, well, why not a family? Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not exciting. That's not interesting. It's
normal.
That's perhaps not quite normal for Jamaica, but that's the desirable situation. So don't let's write about that. So that was kind of going against the norm with that, having them as a two-parent family with, they had a lot more children in my original thought about them, but
yes, but the father being the strong character, being the character in charge of that family, being like the single parent father kind of thing, is so much not the norm. We always read about the mother, and the fathers are a lot of times absent, or they pop in for a spell. But it was good to read a book in which it was about boys and the strong role models that they had, their teachers who went camping with them. And in a lot of ways, it's a book about friendship. It's a book about friendship between siblings.
Yes, very much so.
Because O'Shane did not buy into the whole idea that his brother was not in trouble. He knew his brother was in trouble. And so he went against the grain. And that's something that I think we need to be teaching our children again, the be my brother's keeper kind of message, which I think comes out really strongly in that book.
Don't you think they are? I find that you hear a lot of people, they're very close to their siblings.
Well, I don't know, because I know there are a lot that are, but when you read some of the stories that come out in the papers and come out in the press, and just what people do to their siblings, it really makes you wonder sometimes. Do they start out that way and then over time, other things get in the way? I don't know. But it's nice to have that story, and for our young people to be able to read a story in which the brothers were taking care of each other. I know I was the youngest girl and I was foisted on my sisters all the time. Like Tariq was on his brothers. The youngest one was made to go with his brothers. His brothers didn't want him to come. And my sisters had to deal with that all the time. You talked about a book that you have not yet published.
I had written 4 about these two brothers.
Okay.
And I'd written one that, well, it started off, its first name was More Than a Game of Cricket. So it was the 2 brothers went to stay with an aunt in Lucy. And the aunt was very afraid of duppies. And so that was a big thing in the story. And the Kamar would also been influenced by her and being afraid of duppies. And then there was a secret tunnel. There is really a secret tunnel near Lucy Parish Church.
Okay.
So the boys had investigated that and they found some people digging there, and so they were investigating what was happening. And they were also playing cricket.
Okay.
They were.
And the same 2 boys from this story.
Yes.
So is that going to be coming out at any point?
I don't know, because I had entered that one also for the Jean DaCosta Award. Mm-hmm. And Jean herself spoke to me afterwards, and she said it might be better if they were separate stories. So that's a possibility that it could be split up. And from my experience with trying to get boys to read is that, first of all, they look and see how long the book is.
Yeah. And
then, so maybe if I wrote some shorter stories, maybe they would look and think, well, maybe this would be digestible enough.
The other thing boys look for are pictures.
Yes. Well, that's a difficult thing, because it makes a book so much more expensive when you have illustrations.
Well, even if it's not in color, even if it's black and white, boys definitely look for pictures. My experience is that if there are pictures in the book, they're more likely to read it.
Yes.
They will go after comics before they go after books.
Oh yes, graphic books. Yes.
But I have friends who have grandsons who read, and other younger friends who have boys who read and who enjoy reading. I can't say they're in the majority, I must be honest, but they do enjoy reading. And I think that if we can get stories like these into our schools, I just spoke to somebody else about the same thing. If we can get stories like these into our schools, where they're fun stories, there are stories, they are stories that we can relate to, and have stories that match the audience. So, for example, this book would be a great book in a boys' school. A school. So it's a literature book that boys would have to read. Now, I'm not sexist or genderist in any way, shape or form, but I'm just picking up from your desire to have more boys reading.
Yes.
Because as a girl, I loved adventure stories.
Well, that's what they do say, that girls will read boys' books.
Yes.
But boys will not read girl books. Boys are not going to read books about princesses and ponies and those. But the girls will read adventure stories that the boys like.
True. I was never really much into the princesses and the ponies and stuff. I always was. I'm an adventure person, and so I was always more into things about cars and sports and any kind of adventure thing. Anything where somebody was gonna
Well,
to break a leg.
the Roald Dahl books are very much,
Yes. Yes.
books boys will read.
Yes, definitely.
But what I find the other problem is that they're not really encouraged to read, even at school.
Mhm.
I mean, they have this overloaded curriculum in the primary schools.
Mhm.
No time set aside for reading. I think they have this thing, drop everything and read, which is a session of about 5 minutes.
Not much you can read in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So they're not really given the supply. The books aren't there either in the schools.
Yeah.
What they need is class libraries, instead of them all traipsing off to the library. And most schools do not have a full-time librarian.
Yeah, no, not anymore.
Certainly not a qualified librarian. They might have somebody like somebody who's on National Youth Service or something like that. But they really need to have lots of reading books in every classroom and lots of reading books at different levels. So I'm even for a grade 4. I mean, because I have helped with at a primary school with the reading, and I've had children from grade 2 completely cannot read at all, and then going up, children are not reading at their grade level.
Right.
So a grade 4 class, and they were reading at like grade 1 or grade 2 level. So you need books that they would like in their classroom. I think like from grade 1, they need to have time for reading, or maybe, where some of the children finish the work before the others, let them go and read.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Free up the teacher to help the children who can't read.
I like the idea of the class library.
And make it something fun and enjoyable. I mean, to me, reading is greatly enjoyable. It's something that you're forced to do, so you don't want to do it.
Right. I liked reading. I mean, I was probably the only person in my whole class who liked Silas Marner. I really loved Silas Marner when everybody else was trudging through it and crying through it and going, oh my God, do I have to read this boring book? I just was like, I was all in. But I think that's not the norm because people, like you say, when you're forced to read, it's different from if you read for pleasure. And I think the whole thing is we have to find a way to get our young people to read for pleasure. We have to stay in the fight and keep producing great books like this one, which, as I said, Lost in the Cockpit Country, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those books that you need to get for your young people. It's great for that. It's like a tween book, that sweet spot in between a little too young and a little too old. And it's a great teaching book, teaching kids how to work together, how to be each other's brother's keeper, how to love the environment, how to take care of what is around you, how to be aware of what is around you, And so I want to say thank you so much, Helen, or by your pen name, Billy, for this great book. And I look forward to whatever else is coming down the pike, whatever else is going to be next. I'm looking forward to that. And I want to say thank you for stopping by Shelf Life.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me.
It was great to have you.
Great pleasure talking to you.
You too, and have a wonderful day. And remember, stay safe. Thank you for joining me. Please share this episode and see you again next week. Same time, same place for some more Shelf Life.